You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please go ahead and introduce today's guest.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Sherry Johnson. We're going to talk about Telerehab in the equine space. So, on the business side, Sherry is a co-founder at eCORE. She's a PhD candidate at Colorado State University with a research focus on novel rehabilitation modalities related to tendon healing. Partner at Equine Sports Medicine, she's a DVM from Iowa State University, did a residency in equine sports medicine and rehabilitation at Colorado State University, becoming a board-certified specialist in the field. And she grew up on a row crop farm. Welcome to the show, Sherry. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank you guys so much for having me today. I was really excited about this opportunity.
So we got to get it out right. You said you were prepared for this. So what do you have up your sleeve? I'm scared.
Well, the first question that I have, Ivan, and it's super serious, so I don't mean to put you on the spot straight out of the gate, but I've had a couple questions from fans that actually reached out to me about this podcast. So fans of this podcast that said, "Hey, can you please just ask this question when you get on there?" So I have promised those loyal fans that I would ask you. And that question is actually, where do you buy your shirts from?
Shirts.
Your shirts. There's been interest in your shirts, and there may or may not be certain fans out there that are looking to be Ukrainian mobsters for Halloween. And so they would actually like to know where your shirts come from.
I think you're getting a Starbucks card from Shawn, because that is what for making fun of Ivan. Okay, they come from different places. I'll tell you, the main theme is not buy them in North America. So I'll leave it at that.
Totally fair.
I'm going to build on this as well. I've had the unfortunate and fortunate pleasure to travel with Ivan. He's great to travel with because he'll iron your shirts every morning at 4 a.m. in the morning. So it's not necessarily the quality of the shirts. It's actually the ironing that goes into them. So I think he could even make a North American shirt look okay. Exactly.
Okay. All right. I love it.
All right. Switching. Thank you for the question. Switching back. So this is the first for us. So everything is going on the web. Everything is going through tele. And so how does Telerehab work in the equine space? And how did you convert to it from the actual work in the field? And what is the client base? How they're receiving it?
Yeah, so that's an incredibly loaded question, Ivan. And I'm just going to kind of take a step back and give you guys a little bit of perspective within the equine world. So the field of equine rehabilitation, the American College of Veterinary Sports Medicine and Rehab, or the ACVSMR, is actually quite a small college, and it was founded not an incredibly long time ago. So it's a relatively small niche level of expertise providing rehab care to both small animals and to horses. Now, within the field, you can work primarily on small animals, or you can do equine. That's kind of the biggest sectors of that. And so I actually did my residency training in that here at Colorado State University. They have one of the oldest and largest programs for equine sports medicine and rehab. So now we have this college that's dedicated specifically to that. There still really isn't many of us out there, or I should say there's not many new diplomates coming out every single year that are board certified in this specialty. But the history of equine rehabilitation was that it was primarily dealt with by surgeons, kind of back in the day, if you will. So a horse undergoing an orthopedic procedure like arthroscopy, similar to a lot of the orthopedic procedures that humans undergo. Horses are also undergoing those same procedures, and mostly for athletic purposes, so for performance-related issues. And so the surgeons back in the day were handling the postoperative care of these horses. And as the field has kind of evolved, and also on the human physical therapy side of things, techniques started to advance and become more focused on the secondary or the comorbidities that come along with an injury itself. As those strategies evolved, so did the field of equine rehab. And so fast forward to now, we have the dedicated college to that specifically. So the rehab specialists have kind of taken over where the orthopedic surgeons, they operate the horse comes out of the OR, and now it starts into the recovery phase. So the field of rehab has really started to take care of those horses and to focus on rehab strategies like balance and neuromotor control and augmenting secondary muscle loss and muscle weakness. So I'll just, preface that with giving the listeners some background of, they may not be totally familiar with equine rehab and kind of where it's at, but that's really where it's at. And taking that even a step further, within the field of equine rehab, like what are the rehab centers like out there that you can send horses to, or what are those services like? Well, the field of equine rehab is actually quite confused, I would say, at this point in time. You've got three kind of populations of people doing equine rehab. So on the ground level, you have skilled horsemen, right, that don't have any veterinary training, and they don't have any training really related to tissue pathology or responses of tissue to injury. So you have them out there, operating these quote rehab centers. And then the second population is you have a group of veterinarians that are prescribing rehabilitation that also don't necessarily have any formal training within rehab itself. And then the third tier is this, group of smaller specialists. So the diplomates of the American College of Veterinary Sports Medicine and Rehab that actually have advanced training in the field of rehabilitation. But to the average client, you have all three of those people being kind of marketed within the same avenue, right? And so having clients navigate, what level of care they're able to provide to their horses and that they should be providing can often be kind of a dicey decision-making process. So my partners and I, we actually started this business 3 years ago, and it was pre-COVID. And what we wanted to accomplish was providing specialist level rehab care to the masses. So in my opinion, a rehab program doesn't need to physically be performed by a veterinarian day in and day out. It needs to be performed by a skilled horseman, an owner or a trainer, or someone alike that can safely perform the rehab with those horses. But at the higher level, the prescription of that rehab program should come from the veterinarian, and it should be overseen and longitudinally evaluated by a veterinarian. So our mission in building that business and having those things provided was to provide that level of expertise to people around the world. So I work on horses that are in England, that are in Germany, they're in California. I work on horses all over the world that I don't actually lay hands on, but I'm giving them a level of specialist care in order to rehab these horses from a variety of orthopedic injuries.
It's so interesting, Sherry. I was just thinking back, we did have another rehabber on the podcast, Meg Kelly from South Africa.
Oh,
I don't know if you know
yeah.
her or not.
Yes, I do. I've been on her online pet health.
Oh, yeah, and that totally makes sense because when Meg came on our show, not that she specializes in equine rehab, but just animal health rehab in general, she talked about how small the community was,
Yeah.
even smaller, I think, than the radiology community inside veterinary medicine. And so it must be really interesting. And I wanted to kind of pick up on that point where you said that you work on all of these animals all around the world. How do they get a hold of you? How do they know to call you in Colorado? Like, how does that even happen?
Well, to be honest with you, Shawn, we're still a bit underground in that you kind of got to know somebody that knows somebody. And the services that we're providing are veterinary referrals only. So we don't take any Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street that thinks their horse has injury XYZ. Every case that we deal with has been evaluated by a veterinarian and has a close relationship with a veterinarian, kind of a boots on the ground person that we actually directly communicate with. So it's been a slow, organic growth, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to meet the needs and the cases that were coming in. And every single case is custom, and every single rehab program is developed specifically for that horse with their injury and their goal and their comorbidities in mind. So I've never actually built the same rehab program for this horse as I have this horse because they're all incredibly different. And that's a relatively new concept within the veterinary rehab field. I mean, most veterinarians want a protocol They want to say, okay, what's the cookbook recipe for this specific injury? Like, what's your protocol for hind suspensories? And the reality is I don't have any injury specific protocols that I get off the shelf and slide in for a horse, because everything is built based on their injury. So we've slowly gotten this culture and gotten this following around us of people who are like-minded and believe that rehab should be custom and it should be specific to each horse. So again, it's kind of, it's the veterinarians that we know in our network that are like-minded and believe that physical therapy can really make a difference in horses, and that you don't necessarily need to send them to, a multi-million-dollar rehab center. So it's been very organic. It's been really cool to see it grow. And, we've gotten many interesting cases and interesting clients. And certainly at the international level, that's been such a neat experience to work with those veterinarians and those clients.
That's so interesting. I have a potentially loaded question for you. So with the telemedicine, this is the next topic you bump into immediately, VCPR. And so what is it like to do this consultancy without an established VCPR in other regions? What is it like to do it within North America? And then if there is a challenge in certain jurisdictions with VCPR, how is it fair that skilled horsemen can perform certain work on animals that are within your field of expertise, and they do not require VCPR as the clinicians and licensed in that area?
Yeah, so you were right about the loaded part, Ivan. I think you're getting me back for that shirt situation.
That's right.
So just to take a step back, I know everyone's definitions for telemedicine, telehealth, and teleconsulting are slightly different. So I'm going to give you the world according to Sherry here for a second. But for me, telemedicine is actually the practice of diagnosing and prescribing treatments. Telehealth, in contrast, is more like the radiology, right? So giving another doctor your medical opinion about a certain diagnosis. And then taking that one step further, I think you have also teleconsulting. So again, taking someone else's diagnosis and advising them on how to treat it and what to do with it. And I think our business, specifically Equine Telerehab, falls in the middle of telehealth and teleconsulting. The cases that I work with, they've been evaluated by a veterinarian in person, and there's a very established VCPR in place there. My services are building that custom plan for that horse and that level of physical therapy that we're able to provide given the tools that they have access to. So every single plan has benchmarks, and every single plan has, look, your veterinarian needs to come out and reevaluate this horse at this specific time. And there's always a very careful conversation about setbacks, because when you're working in rehab, it's not if they will happen, it's when they will happen. So we always have a conversation up front about, should your horse seem not as comfortable, should there be a setback, you need to get in direct contact with your veterinarian and get it looked at before we do anything further within that rehab plan. So we, are extremely cognizant of that. And we were actually doing this stuff pre-COVID, and then COVID happened and everyone, obviously shut down, and even veterinarians weren't able to go out and assess patients like they were pre-COVID. So there came this augmented reality of like, oh, we got to get going on this, telehealth and telemedicine thing now. But the reality is that equine veterinarians do a lot of teleconsultation in their practices just in general, whether they're aware of it or not. So getting pictures, getting videos from clients, all of those things in my mind fall into that list. And those aren't new things that have just happened since COVID. Those have been going on for eons within the equine veterinary community. And it's interesting because, and I kind of wanted to get your guys' take on this as well, in terms of, small animal seems to have evolved so much more and embraced the telemedicine thing so much more than equine veterinarians have. Within the equine world, it's still very, very new. It's very, how can you really be doing a good job that way? So I think there's still quite a few kinks to work out on our end, but at least in my conversations with my small animal colleague counterparts, that seems to be the case.
That's really interesting. I mean, personal observation, it appears like large animal is very much like the doctor of the turn of the century, where they're going and visiting the patients, and it's the norm. And in it, conversely, small animal has become almost a counterpart to human medicine in a lot of ways. And I think that at least in my estimation, it's almost because it's much more difficult to transport a horse or a large animal to a vet clinic. And so I think that you have those challenges kind of at play, but you also just have that mentality, I think of the end user customer, that no value can be derived unless you're in front of them, perhaps.
Right. And I think that's the case, Shawn. I mean, certainly when we work with the horses that are at the Olympic level, it's interesting because you would think, well, those horses, they have this like glam squad around them. They have these amazing veterinarians around them, and they do. But those veterinarians have acknowledged, like, hey, I don't actually have tons of training within rehab specifically, but there's people that do. And now with this business, we've been able to make those services available to that type of horse and that type of client. And it doesn't mean that your horse has to be going to the Olympics to get our services, right? Like, we just need a dedicated owner and someone that truly believes physical therapy is going to help their horse, in order for it to be a suitable fit. But yeah, very much. I mean, that relationship between the equine veterinarian and the horse owner and the trainer, it's hugely important, and it's a very coveted, special relationship.
I just wanted to comment on your question about the, telemedicine and small versus large and the adaptation. I think that my passion is in marketing, and I think that we are marketing this thing wrong. And COVID gave us a perfect window of opportunity how to shape the language around it. And as you said, maybe the clients value it less, and they're saying, this is telemedicine is not the same as visit. I think that as soon as COVID hit, that's a perfect opportunity to say, when the next phone call happens, you say, and we're going to perform, yes, I'm listening to your problem. This could be a virtual consult, which we do because of the COVID. And just don't even say we now do telemedicine. Don't discount it. It's the same knowledge. It's the same people, the same amount of time spending on it. And I don't know why veterinarians underprice them. They always do now. You talk to everybody who, whatever the price is for appointment, they lower the cost, the price for the virtual appointment. It didn't change. The circumstances changed, which gave us a window of opportunity to adopt this. I very much more prefer to talk as much as I can from this chair in the office instead of getting in the car and driving somewhere to have a 10 minutes conversation with someone spending an hour driving. So I value that more, and I would pay for that more.
Right.
So I think that it's really about marketing in a different way. And let's not call it marketing, because maybe vets don't like the word marketing. Just the language that we use around it. Don't put it in a separate section, telemedicine. Just say that now, because of the current situation, we're doing most of our appointments online. It didn't change. Like, that's just my personal take on this.
Right.
I totally agree with you, Ivan. And one of the things, like, I have an example of this. We've been working with a really great agency in my company. Robots and Pencils is the name.
That's not your name, is it? I hope not.
No, it's not my name. No,
it's something you would come up with.
Listen, it's a worldwide agency. They've done some really incredible stuff. But we've been working with them, and it's really incredible. A very, very expensive agency. But, when you jump in and you work with a professional, whether it's remote or not remote, you're not paying, for the 40 hours worth of work that they're doing. You're paying for the time that they spend on your project, plus the experience that they bring along. And that has so much value. You can work with two individuals. They can do the same amount of work, but the person that has the experience and the knowledge, like the veterinarians do, that's what you're paying for. And I think you're right. To discount it really diminishes the value that the veterinarian or the veterinarian rehabber can provide. And it just is counterproductive.
Yeah. And I agree with you guys completely. I think that on the equine side, we've been doing like telemedicine for years. Have we been capitalizing on that financially? Have we been billing for it appropriately? Absolutely not. That's a newer wave. And when we started this telerehab business several years ago, most equine veterinarians looked at us like, that's weird. And how does that work? And what do you mean? You give them instructional tools and PDFs to do these things, but like, you're not actually looking at the horse. Well, no, I'm not, but you are. And that's the relationship that we have. But the reality is that doing nothing is always easier than doing something, right? So getting people inspired and motivating them to get out there and spend time with their horses and help them along that healing journey is huge. And that's the entire premise that our business is built on.
So Sherry, I've got like a precursor to the last questions, which is how have you leveraged technology inside of eCORE in order to be able to do this with patients all around the world?
Yeah, well, Aaron Wallace will probably kick my butt if I don't give he and Garrett Walls a huge nod, because they are honestly the people behind eCORE that have really pushed our technology forward. And, Garrett developed our website, created our website, helps fine tune it. And it's still not exactly how, it's not the final end product. We're still constantly making improvements. But the technology piece of it is huge, right? Like if I have a client who can't work with the website and who can't upload videos of the horse for me to evaluate and then dynamically tailor the program, then that's a complete barrier to our business. So I very much work in the science and the physical rehabilitation of these horses. Aaron and Garrett are very much behind the scenes, making sure that the technology is there to support me in doing that. So it's been huge. There's been so many learning curves along the way. And fortunately, they had gone through a lot of those trial and errors with Lacuna. And so this, eCORE was somewhat easy for Garrett to build out, but it still is constantly evolving and, really keeping things at a high level, user friendly and accessible. All of our billing is online. I mean, everything we do is online, and that's our preference, right? Like, I don't want to be getting videos at 3 a.m. from Germany, that they're doing their weekly evaluation. So I wake up, the videos are there, I evaluate them and get the horse a new plan. So it's huge. It's a huge part of our business.
Awesome. Well, I guess that brings us to all the time that we have. So we like to wrap up the same way with everyone. First question we've got for you is a book, a TED Talk, something that's inspired you to get to where you're at in your career journey that you think our listeners might enjoy.
That was a great question. And I've thought about this for a very long time. But for me, I think my top is probably The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. And it's a great TED Talk. It's older, but if you have a chance to listen to it and really sit and absorb it, it's fabulous. It's all about the why you do business, not the what or the how, but it's really answering that question of your mission and your vision and why you get up out of bed to do this business that you do. And I think his visions and takes on, the process of intuitive decision making are incredibly fascinating as well. And building a culture of people that believe what you believe and that are of that like mind. So, our business isn't for everyone, but for those people that are on that physical therapy train and on that rehab train, it certainly is. It resonates and it jives with them. So that's the culture that we're looking to build on our side of things. And so I very much resonate with that TED Talk.
Yeah, Simon Sinek is a lot of people mention him, and I certainly love him. And maybe as a sequel to what is not for everyone, but how to build sort of the marketing around it that you might like. It's Seth Godin's The Purple Cow. It's a really good read about marketing. So I really enjoy that guy. So I think that might be a good addition to your library. We also asked this question: do you know anybody except Aaron and Garrett giving you some advice on my shirts that we could invite to this show?
So yeah, they obviously would have been my first choices, but you guys had them already, so they're off the table. But I actually think that another person I would highly recommend for this podcast would be Dr. Myra Barrett. She is an equine radiologist. She's an incredible veterinary entrepreneur who has started her own teleradiology practice that's specifically focused on reading equine diagnostic images. And she has also spearheaded within the American College of Veterinary Radiology. She has actually created the equine diagnostic imaging residency path. So equine never had a specific path for itself before, and she has actually carved that out. And she was one of the main people driving that movement. So she's an incredible person, an incredible entrepreneur, and an amazing, solid human being that I incredibly look up to. So I think she would be an absolute riot and a great time and super interesting discussion for y'all to have.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website, at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.